You don't have a car like this 1970 426 Hemi Superbird without accumulating some stories. And wait till you hear how this car first became famous. It's always fascinating to me to learn about how a lot of these muscle cars were actually used. You know, some were bought and used as race cars, others were put away into a garage, most of them were just driven like everyday cars. You know, at the time nobody thought these things would be worth so much money and be so valued to collectors years down the line. But this particular car has a very interesting story as part of its history. Believe it or not, this car at one point was a criminal. Now this car is super cool even if it didn't have a storied history. It's a 1970 Plymouth Road Runner Superbird, one of the most unique and instantly identifiable muscle cars ever built. Of course, these things were designed to be super aerodynamic for the super speedways of NASCAR. This car was intended to go 200 miles an hour. It's got the nose cone on the front, it's got the tall wing on the back, and there's numerous little modifications on the body, like the rear window, for example, that help it slide through the wind and be as fast and as aerodynamic as it could be. This one is even more unique. I think they made about 1,935 of these cars new. Only 135 were fitted with the legendary 426 Hemi engine. That's what you find in this one. This aerodynamic Superbird and the 426 Hemi kind of go together hand in hand for a bunch of different reasons. The engine was needed to make these cars go fast in NASCAR, and the aerodynamics were needed to make these engines go faster in the cars in NASCAR. So this thing made 425 horsepower and 490 foot-pounds of torque. It looks right at home. The block was orange on these things originally. It matches the outside of the car, and this car is big enough to where the Hemi doesn't completely overpower it like some of the other cars that you'd find these in. This particular example shifts gears through an automatic transmission, and it's got an 8 3/4 rear axle with 355-to-1 gears. So this thing on the street, even if you never raced at NASCAR, just as a street car, was certainly a blast to drive, which might be the reason why it ended up doing what it did. Back in the early 70s, a couple of guys decided to stick up a Harrah's casino in Reno, Nevada, and they used this very car as a getaway car to make off with all the cash. Now eventually they were caught, and this car has with it some FBI documents that kind of detail the story and the report of the burglary and all that jazz. But what I think is interesting is it kind of makes sense and it kind of doesn't make sense to use a bright red Hemi Superbird as a getaway car. On the one hand, it's probably certainly fast enough to get away from any other law enforcement officials, whatever they were driving at the time, probably Belvedere's or, other Chrysler products. But you can't really blend in with the general public when you've got a car painted in TorRed, this bright red color with a giant wing on the back. So I don't know. I don't know if it was because the car was so visible that they got caught. I don't really know the details of the story, but it's a documented story and part of this car's history. Other interesting things on this car are some of the combination of its parts. It's got a black interior, it has black bucket seats, but it has a column shift. You would expect to see buckets with a floor console. It is an automatic. You would be looking for a floor shifter, but the automatic is on the column. It also has kind of a unique stripe delete package on the back. Most of these cars had a stripe that went around the tailpan. This one does not have that. And it also has the 15x7 stamped steel wheels with the little dog dish hubcap. Also kind of a unique thing to see on a car like this. And the vinyl top. And what I think was cool is when you look at this car, there was a lot of things different to turn a regular Road Runner into a Superbird. And there's this interesting little closeout panel on the quarter panel that they had to install to accommodate the rear sail panel and to fit the rear window and blend that in with the regular Road Runner quarter panels, because they're definitely very, very different. And of course, you've got the long pointed aerodynamic nose with the flip-up headlights and you know, the giant wing on the back. At first glance, this car appears similar to its cousin, the Dodge Charger Daytona, but the Plymouth Road Runner Superbird is very, very different. When you start comparing the two, you see the uprights on the rear wing are a totally different shape. They're in a different position, they're a different height. This rear glass and the rear pillars and the way the deck lid all comes together, that's all totally different. The quarter panels are different, the nose is different, and everything that looks similar really isn't. And we've talked about this before, featuring other cars in Muscle Car of the Week, Dodge Daytona, for example, that these cars with the big wings and the bright colors weren't necessarily hot sellers at the dealers. You know, a lot of these things sat on dealer floors for a long, long time, you know, quite frankly, because they're just different. They're kind of weird, they were a little more expensive, and you know, they were designed for NASCAR racing, which normal people didn't do. And because of the additional equipment on them, the heavier nose and the big wing, they weren't really great for drag racing because they weighed more than their counterparts, and they're longer, so might not have fit in a garage, you know, as easily. And I did read a story once where a guy was getting a bunch of grief about having a car like this with a big wing because people used to say, hey, you know, can I hang my laundry on that wing? You know, my dryer's broken. You know, so they were actually ribbing people a little bit for having such a weirdo car. But now, if you think about it, you practically have to rob a bank to get the funds to buy one. We know for a fact that this car has been driven hard with its previous history. It's been restored. It's one of the more unique cars in the Brothers collection on many levels because it does have the interesting story and it is such an interesting car. And we are lucky that they have these kind of things in that collection to be able to bring them to you each week. So it was a good choice to use this as a getaway car because it's certainly fast, but it's not very inconspicuous. I don't know, not a good choice. Anyway, you can see more pictures of this one on our website at MuscleCarOfTheWeek.com. Check out the Facebook page. You can share comments, share pictures, say what you want about cars like this, and our YouTube channel makes it easy to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode of Muscle Car of the Week. I can make a getaway of my own now.